February 13th. We do have first, as part of our agenda, a public hearing. We have liquor licenses, renewals for the Samoset and Trap, and a liquor license, a new liquor license for Freya's Ice Cream. So, John, I don't know if there's anything you want to cover on those.
No, I don't think anything in particular. All these have gone for the police chief, and he's reviewed them. I think if you want, I don't know if you want to go one at a time. Or...
Yeah, we can start. Is there anyone here representing Freya's Ice Cream? Come on up. I say come on up, but we don't have a microphone.
Right.
So if you want to stand up and just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Teresa Inman. I'm the owner of Freya's Ice Cream. We serve gelato, sorbetto, and we also serve sweet and creamy crepes.
And
What other questions?
And want to serve alcohol.
I would like to serve alcohol.
Okay. Any questions from anyone on the board?
I love seeing people come in and get an ice cream on Sunday.
I was gonna say, is there a special kind of beer that goes with ice cream?
No.
That I'm unaware of?
Dark beer
Give it
is
to a
really
parent.
good with ice cream.
We're pairing.
Yeah.
All right, do we have to vote on these one by one?
Mhm.
Is
You
there
do.
a particular motion, because I don't see one right now, but
Oh,
Do we need public comment?
yeah.
any comments from the public?
Yeah.
Seeing none?
Do we vote on?
No, after.
After, okay.
Yeah. But you're right. That should have been
Yeah,
further down too.
okay, that's fine, perfect, we'll do that. The next we have is a renewal for the Samoset Resort. Is there anyone here from Samoset? Okay. Any comments from the select board? Any public comments? Okay. And then the last one we have is a renewal for Trapped. Is there anyone here representing Trapped? No? Okay. Any comments from select board? None. Any public comments? None. All right, does that close our public meeting?
Sounds like it. Yeah.
I was saying that Randy or other people would like evaluate all of this to make sure.
Right.
They're actually signed off. I did see the something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense, go.
Yeah, so it has been.
That's right.
Well, then we will post the hearing and move to our regular agenda. And remind me, John, when we're gonna vote on those?
So that would be under, just trying to pull this, sorry,
Action
I'm up to it. Yeah, under action items. Put that back on.
All right,
Yep.
so we'll come back to that in action. Okay,
Sounds
so
good.
John, I'll turn it over to you for town manager's report.
Sure. We'll start with a bit of good news. As some of you may have seen, we competed once again versus the town of Camden in the toboggan races.
Good job.
Um,
On the day that it was not 45 hours.
Thankfully, yeah, because I don't think anyone would have wanted to race anything other than to the car, get warm. But no, good news. So we were successful for a year again. Many thanks to Jeff Hamilton, Patrick Annis for finding a sled for us to race on, and Diane, who's very helpful in sort of organizing our efforts. So we'll look for the 3-peat next year. We'll hope that goes well. So that's obviously the good news. Unfortunately, that same day we encountered some significant damage at the library. Thankfully, we had fire department was on the scene very, very, very quickly. At 10:09, the tone went out, and by the time I rolled in about 20 minutes later, they had pretty much cleared out all the water out of the building, and they were rolling out of on Lamrock Street. So very quick work on their part. Obviously, the type of construction the building lended itself a little bit better to removing the water and getting the water out of the building. While there was obviously a lot to remove, ServPro was in there last week. We were very successful in getting the water out of those typical waterlogged spots, the wooden baseboards and things like that. There was damage to the elevator and of course the sprinkler system. So both of those required repair, and we were able to complete those repairs by the end of last week. So that allowed us to reopen and open today, thankfully, and we'll be open this week. Book drop is open, and many thanks to everyone who stopped in and certainly had their well wishes, as we sort of went through that process, because obviously it's a little bit of sort of what could be, what could happen here. Good news is we only lost 2 books in the process. Yeah, after all that, only 2 books. Yeah.
It's impressive.
The hardwood on the main level did absorb a lot of the water and probably will require replacement. Insurance adjusters will be here this week to look at that, but largely we were relatively unscathed. There's some sort of lessons learned in areas in terms of how to better use the heat. Also, it's certainly a rarity of that sort of circumstance to see temperatures like that, wind like that. So that was certainly an issue that it's a good stress test of sorts. But I think we passed through that with damage, but damage that we could sustain. So we're going to make some improvements to insulation and heat, but not of any sort of meaningful cost. In terms of sort of flipping the script on that, the repairs at the Opera House are still ongoing. This week we'll have Surf Pro removing sort of damaged areas from the auditorium floor and the like. We're also going to be putting a camera through the sprinkler system and trying to determine its suitability. When we received bids back from the damage that we had found in the Opera House, there was concerns raised that the sprinkler system may really be in worse shape than we thought. So we're going to get that investigation and see where that stands. So at this point, there's still that's still to be determined, but there may need to be some tough decisions raised about how to handle that. That would be a tremendous cost. Last estimates on replacing that sprinkler system are about $300,000. So, and there are currently no reserves for that sort of project. So, something on that. Yeah.
Could we, there was an extreme circumstance.
Yeah.
Low temperatures, big winds, for an extended period of time. Could we engage in the police department perhaps to do public building checks?
Checks to the building.
I
Yeah.
mean, you may never be there at the right time, but if you happen to catch it when it's just leaking, you might be able to notify people quickly.
Yeah. I think in particular the Opera House would have been one in particular would have been served well by that. Yeah.
Extenuating circumstances.
Yeah,
It
with
might be
the
a-
police department or the buildings and grounds.
Yeah.
But at night, that was an overnight thing when it was 5 PM till noontime the next day.
Yeah. The Opera House.
Unfortunately, that was, but at least.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's a good thought.
What's the guidance on like shutting off the water, which for a sprinkler system? If nobody's using the building, are you allowed to turn the water off to the building? For the 17 below,
Right.
easy thing over the weekend is to turn the water off. You know, if you can do
Well, then,
Do that with sprinklers.
right. It's a charge system, so that has to maintain water in that line. The interesting thing, the Opera House is not, and it's a dry system, and so that allowed it to deal with cold temperatures. The issue is that when you lose power, the system as it was developed is meant to charge when they lose power, because you don't know what could happen when the power is out. So that filling and emptying over 30 years caused corrosion in the lines, and so that pinhole sized hole in that sprinkler line is what ultimately got to us at the Opera House. So
Do we know what caused, it's such a new building, I was surprised that we would have an issue at the library. Do we know what really, I know it was 45 below, but
yeah,
aside from that, Other buildings were okay, so I'm just wondering
I think
what happened.
there's a variety of factors that could be involved. There could be more insulation in that section. There could have been the heat could have been higher. There's an electric heat in that entry space that could have been turned on a little bit higher than it was. There's an elevator vault shaft right behind that where it's an unheated space, though it's insulated on the outside. When you open the door, even 2 days later, which was 30 degrees, you open that door on the bottom level and you can feel the cold coming through. So I think that there's a lot of different factors involved. And, I think we have a better plan in terms of insulating that space to ensure that cold doesn't chase its way through. But also, if that room was heated as it should have been, that bathroom, anyone who's used that bathroom in that space is always very, very cold. It's a cold part of the building. So having more heat in that area would have gone a long way, I think, as well. So, okay. So moving through the rest of the budget, obviously the bulk of the time over the last few weeks has been devoted to budget preparations. You can see, obviously, that these are hot off the presses. Budget prep, or I should say budget process, effectively would begin on Wednesday night, 6 o'clock, where we'll go over sort of the high points of the budget, give people an introduction to what's included. And obviously, shouldn't be a surprise for the five of you, the salaries and benefits were the predominant driver in this budget. Really tried to trim back in other areas, other projects, other areas that we could put off for another year. That's really what we tried to do, because knowing that those salary and benefit issues were going to rear their head this year, 2 new union contracts, a salary survey, and the like, this was going to be all along. This is going to be the point of the breaking point of the whole budget. So we have that, and then last up, I'll mention those who perhaps may have seen it in the news, but Maine DOT came out with its work plan for the coming 3 years, and the Goose River Bridge is listed on there to the tune of $3.85 million. So there is money set aside in Maine DOT's plan. What that bridge looks like, what it's going to be, what color, we don't know any of those details. They are currently undergoing their engineering for that next phase of the project. I would expect that we'll hear from them later this spring and ready to engage our VPI committee, as well as the town at large, what they propose to do with Goose River Bridge. So
there were people from DOT down there today.
Oh, good.
Looking at the underside of it, they parked down at the Harbor Park and
Yep.
walked over.
Great. Yeah, so that's obviously that, until this point, we were unsure as to what number or even if there would be any funding available whatsoever for the bridge. Would they?
That doesn't sound like enough to replace the bridge.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
Robinson
yeah.
Road is like.
Right.
800, yes, 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 that's true.
I mean,
So,
it's a great
yeah.
start.
Great start, yes. But they actually have the funding established in that work plan was something that we hadn't seen to this point. It had all been a lot of talk. So it seems we're in their plans. So we'll see what the next phase is. But that's about it.
All right. Any questions for John? All right. Do we have any public input on non-agenda items? Okay. Then we'll move to our consent agenda. We have a committee resignation, Jennifer Mirabali, thank you, from our Economic Development Committee. So thank you, Jennifer. And then we have the meeting minutes from January 9th. Do we have a motion for that?
Move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor?
No.
All right, then we will move on to our action items. So our first action item Let's do the vote for the liquor license.
Mhm.
So our guests can depart if she would like. So,
And how detailed the information has to be? Could I just say I need to do the
Yeah.
liquor license application for Fraser Ice Cream?
okay.
Second.
Yeah. Or you want discussion?
I'd like, yes, please.
Discussion.
Yes, my name is Joe Stranowski, I'm Chair of the Rockport Planning Board. We reviewed the application by Freya, it was last summer, I think. It was a good addition to the village, certainly. We looked seriously at parking, we looked at the hours of operation. And at that time, we approved an ice cream shop. And when the planning board looked at it, there were some spaces that came grandfathered in with Union Hall. And we looked at the fact that an ice cream shop with the hours identified as operating largely during the day and the traffic it would draw was a good use of that space. My concern is that it would appear that a liquor license in an ice cream shop would be considered a change of use. You previously had a coffee shop, I think that was granted a liquor license in the village, that was also a change of use. And I think that when we do a change of use like that, it should go back before the planning board to review that. So that is my concern. And not just these, but as we look forward also at liquor licenses that come in. If they're for a business that previously was not serving liquor or alcohol, and it is a change of use of that operation, that property, I just think it's something that needs to be looked at. So not to say that it's going to cause an issue or not, but I think it needs to be looked at, especially with the sensitivities of parking in the village.
Can this be accomplished by next month?
We have a meeting on February 23rd, and if the application is presented in a timely fashion, then yes, it can be considered very quickly. We always do things within a
No, I'm
10-day.
just trying to,
Yeah, we're not trying to delay anything.
Did the Seafolk have to go through a change of use?
Oh, they did not, and I question that also. A coffee shop to a pub.
I mean, I don't disagree that we might need to look at that more broadly, but I personally, I wouldn't want to hold it up because we don't have a policy or a process in place.
Well, I think
I'm
there's-
sorry, I have this owl in my,
Yeah.
in my view.
No, I mean, the land use ordinance clearly states that there is a change of use of the property. And so then you get down into the definition of what change of use would be. It would be hours of operation, traffic flow, things like that.
I don't recall, Supo, anybody coming and mentioning that to us. So that's probably why we weren't aware of it, perhaps.
Your environment, 5 years, 5 years.
Yeah, no, I can see what you're saying, I mean, it's not,
It's a little different.
right.
Yeah.
So again, I'm not ruling on approval or disapproval here. I'm just saying that I think it's something that we need to take a broader look at.
And I appreciate that too, and I totally get when Michelle has it, that maybe we go ahead and approve Freya if other independently the board is, but that we also recognize we've got to, you know, we should establish some policies so that Freya doesn't come in, the Freya doesn't come in, spend time filling the liquor license out.
And they should have gone through.
Sure.
And nobody said, oh, by
Right.
the way, you're planning on.
Right, and I think that's, my position would be, we have somebody out from the planning board that's saying they believe
how
it
it
is.
should be.
Right,
Right.
so I'm inclined to, if they can have it accomplished and be back before us, for our March meeting, then do,
We meet monthly, of course, the planning board. our next
no,
meeting.
I'm just saying for our next meeting, if
Yep.
this were,
Yep.
You guys
To be
do it on the
completed.
23rd.
Yep.
and be brought back before us, so tabling it would be mine. It's not like they're in business and they're renewing the licenses, so we're not gonna be, I don't think we're gonna be putting you off terribly, that would.
I don't have any plans, nothing set in place, I don't have, taps ready to go, like, it's, I was doing.
Doing
it-
our due diligence.
I just would rather.
Okay. Yes.
I would just have a comment that says, what is the select board gonna do if the planning board turns it down when you were just about ready to approve it?
Well, I mean, that's the challenge, right? I mean,
And you
I
must
mean,
be-
it comes back, so if you don't approve, so let's walk through that scenario, because if you don't approve the change of use,
As I say, I think we're looking at different criteria. You're looking at it, as you should, as granting a liquor license to
Right.
an establishment.
Mhm.
We're looking at it from the use of the property, the traffic flows, and things like that in the surrounding area. So we're looking at different criteria.
but is it really changing her change of, is it really changing her use? That's, I guess that's my question.
I don't know.
She's serving ice cream, and it's great if we have a glass of wine to go with our ice cream, or we have a beer to go with our ice cream. I mean, my feeling is at the end of the day, it's the same. Right, just my thought. So I think it's a very good question of, you know, we could put her through another process, and the planning board could say no, and then, you know, we're back in the,
We'll come up with more
back,
parking.
right,
Well,
right, we're back and
and,
forth.
you know, you're
So,
absolutely right. I mean, we were probably, in all likelihood, going to be approving it. Until we had more information that we didn't have.
You know the process is.
And this is, a representative of the planning board, so.
right, so,
So is it clear that it, like, for the alcohol is a change of use? I don't have an OSU bill anyway.
Well, change of use is very loosely defined within the land use ordinance.
there's,
Typically, when Scott looks at it, I think he looks at a change in volume of traffic flow, and I think he looks at business hours. And you know, that's one of the things that's especially sensitive in the village, of course, is business hours.
are you
because there's
planning
like-
on changing business hours?
Our business hours will remain the same as they did last summer. And we additionally already serve crepes. And so it is like savory crepes as we would get for dinner. So it is more to complement just the dinner menu items rather than it is to become another additional, you know, hour extension. We would still close at 8 in the summer.
She's like, I'm working on
Latest would be
that.
9 if we have a line out the door at 8 o'clock, but otherwise, no.
I mean, personally, I would like to proceed with the vote on it, and if it,
I would be comfortable doing that. I don't want to disregard.
I don't either, right? Absolutely.
Absolutely. But I'd like to get a little bit.
Something we need to look at in process.
absolutely, without a doubt. Yeah, absolutely.
Comment, so I, you know, am the resident and renter of the parking lot that gets used for prayers a lot of the time. Does not why I came to meetings tonight. But I would like to see the planning board do its process, because it, as the person that sees that parking happen a lot of the time, there is a difference between people who have had something to drink coming back to their cars and not. So I think you have a planning board that does a very nice job, and seems like a good use of that board.
One more comment, and then I'm done. Is it possible that the select board could approve it, subject to the planning board approving it on the 23rd when they meet?
So it shouldn't have to come back. Are you comfortable with that? Oh, okay.
What's your original application say?
What's that? No, 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 because
Well, you guys are doing a
No, I
good
was
job.
thinking the same thing, is can we approve it pending a review from the planning board? But then again, what does her original business application say? And is it broad enough that it was already done? We don't have that to review either, so it may already have said something about that, but I don't know. I don't have it.
Yeah, the first thing, since there's such a process within the state for a liquor license, that there is a lot of process associated with adding alcohol. So that also, put on an automatic change if you want to serve alcohol, I just raised that as something that, and again, I think it is what you want as a process for the town. And we really like our business owners to trust that when they come to the town office, they get good direction, and don't end up finding out that now they're gonna be the subject of a new policy that we're about to figure out.
So does that mean that, when an application is submitted for the town to review, could it be just one more layer of Scott looking at it and see if there's a change of use,
That's what.
which doesn't happen now?
Doesn't happen now, right?
And we weren't made aware of the Seafolk one. to, you know,
If I could just add, I think Joe somewhat, mentioned this. This is a bit of chicken and egg with this, somewhat. At least how I look at it is that, that when a new business starts, there are land use side of things, land use side of the house things, and then there's state licensing needed. And all of these happen sort of independently, but then also concurrently. And everyone wants all the licensing to happen all at the same time. It's somewhat like when you're trying to get a loan, but you also have to get the building permit at the same time. It's everyone's asking for something, and nobody wants to seemingly go first. So in this circumstance, I could see a situation where you could grant a license, a liquor license to a prospective business prior to they've received planning board approval necessarily to operate in that manner. But then it's up to, your code enforcement team to make sure that they're following the use of what they're currently approved. So it's, like I said, I think one could go first, the other could go first. To Denise's point, I think it would be great if we had one place where all of those items sort of flow through. But it is a bit of, at least in how it's operated here, bit of a distinction there. It's a town clerk, police, really what we focus on with liquor licensing, less so than on the land use side. And clearly we're missing a spot that we need to.
and we're not putting the applicant out because it's not a business currently. And rather than granting it and then having them come back and say, sorry, it's not, it doesn't serve alcohol, it doesn't have a license.
Not presently.
It's not a renewal. So, I'm more inclined to wait
Mhm.
the additional 30 days or whatever time it takes for us to be at our next meeting and get the input from these guys. And we just need to make sure that this type of thing gets a once over before it comes to us next time.
But rather than create a condition. I mean, I guess
Yeah. No, go ahead.
really interested in that.
Got a couple.
Well, I've been on the planning board 10 years, and you guys do what you're doing is, in my mind, completely disrespectful of what the role of the planning board is. So you have to make up your mind, if you're gonna have a planning board, this is a change of use.
So that's my question, is
Is
it a change of use?
Well, if it is, then this is a clear planning board
Yeah,
Mhm.
decision.
I would agree with that,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure if the definition of change of use is every time you want to start serving alcohol in a business, does that become a change of use and rather than?
Well, it impacts, we heard somebody talk about how it impacts, the climate and the atmosphere of the parking area. And there's ripple effects when you have alcohol.
I can't say for sure, but in my original business plan and starting, even with speaking with the planning board, it was always in our plan to add wine and beer to our menu. And so I would like to review it. I would have to go back and see, make sure that that was in the initial application. But also, being that we have 9 of June, Seafolk, 18 Central, all around us, and all of those customers are using all of the parking, every single space. I don't know that that's really gonna change us adding in somebody coming in for a crepe and ice cream, having a beer, or a glass of wine. We're not adding, we will never have a full bar. It will be, it's a very small space, so there's just not room. We have a max amount of 22 people in there at one time for customers. There's not room for people to be hanging out, cheering at TV. It's not that kind of atmosphere.
In all likelihood, the people that would be in there perhaps would be waiting for their reservation.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I get all that.
Yeah.
Where does it talk about change of use?
What was that, Eric?
I said, where does it talk about change of use? Do you know what the number is?
I think it's in the application section, 713.
Thank you.
Keeps going.
So it's probably not just limited to alcohol there are other changes of use beyond that that impact the traffic flow into the business. And, this was on Route 1, frankly, where there was more on-site parking, and probably wouldn't be as much of a consideration either. Whereas there are some sensitivities in the village right now with parking and hours of businesses, because there is some interlacing of the parking and the hours.
Hours aren't changing, the model's not changing, the food you serve is not changing.
We have to
The
rewrite
only
this.
thing is you are requesting to serve
Because it
beer,
says
wine, or spirit.
15 copies. We're not doing that.
So-
And
And I
again,
don't
that's
see
new,
it-
that's new information. I didn't know.
Okay, yeah, right, no, and that's perfect, and I don't want you to think that we are disrespecting the
No.
planning board.
No.
I think it's a great process that we need to make sure is in place, so that if someone is changing use, that they don't come to us and then have to go back to another process, so
Mhm.
we've got to figure out how do you make that seamless to the customer, so that we're not kind of ping-ponging back and forth. Or maybe it is, these types of applications that are new need to come to
Right.
planning board to say, is it change of use or not? But personally, I would like to vote on it, and then, depending on the vote, we can go from there. So, any further discussion before we move on? Okay, all in favor?
What was the motion?
You approve the liquor license continuation.
You can't make that contingent, like Mark said, on the
We can
planning.
do anything we want.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm talking about a vote,
Well, we
or a
can,
motion rather. excuse me.
okay. So we could do a
Right now, we
motion.
have a motion.
Right now,
And
we have
that
a
way,
motion to.
and that way you're not saying the planning board is not involved,
Right, okay, so right now we have a motion to approve, so let's finish our motion to approve, and then we'll,
Yeah, and I guess I just again wanted to just concern that just because you ask for a liquor license, is that automatically means it's always a change of use under the
Right.
use ordinance?
Well, I think it sounds to me like we don't,
Otherwise, nothing.
somebody doesn't know what to change the use is,
well, that's.
and
the
that's,
problem, right?
and that seems to be a problem, I mean, just because you're serving liquor doesn't mean you're gonna get 50 extra people a day.
Here's the definition
gambling.
of change of use. Any alteration of the activity habitually taking place on a property or in a structure that results in a change in the classification or description of that activity under this ordinance. Examples include, but are not limited to, changing from residential to commercial use, changing from a restaurant to a professional office.
That's how change of use is defined.
Yeah, and
I
I
think it
just,
goes on to speak about volume too, traffic volume, underneath that. No?
not in the current
Oh, you said-
chapter 300, amended plan and its definitions. There may be more, this is the definition section.
Oh, chapter 1300, I think.
Is that there's more of a definition?
I think so.
So, there's been a motion and a second, right?
There's a motion and a second to approve a liquor license.
So, my comment on that is that I'm gonna vote against it. I would like to have them have the opportunity.
Okay, so let's go through with that motion then.
Well, this is an opportunity to talk, isn't it, before the vote?
Oh, I thought you were giving your vote.
No, I'm just
Okay.
explaining where I'm going with it. I don't have any problem with what you're gonna do, but I want to make sure if there's a question raised by the planning board, that it's given a fair shake. And that if that shake can be done by the time we have our next meeting, and also recommendations perhaps put in place, so that these types of things don't crop up. Perfect. So,
Everyone understands, of course, that we have no authority on liquor licenses. There'll always be two separate applications.
Absolutely.
Right, but it should be a coherent process.
Yeah, and I guess I just am a little concerned with the precedent that is suggesting that just getting a liquor license is automatically a change of use.
No, I don't think that's true. I didn't think them say that.
So what is it about this liquor license application that? Sorry, it's.
Well, you're asking me questions. I didn't really know anything about the application before I walked in. So I can't
I'm
answer
not
anything.
So would I, saying that your motion gets approved, would I need to then apply to the planning board to have it reviewed to see if it is a change of use? And then you would be able to vote on it?
I mean, I think that's what the recommendation is, right, Joe? That
Yeah.
you would apply to see if it is a change of use?
Because the planning board does not have definitive language established about whether it is or not.
If I can just interject one thing here. The code enforcement officer is the one who has to determine if a change of use is necessary, for then which an application would then be filed to the planning board for their review. So the code enforcement officer is the first group that would have to review to see if a change of use is necessary. Now she could still apply too, because anyone has the right to apply for anything. But that's the first step, would be to go to the code enforcement officer to review the application.
And for all future new, not existing
Mhm.
applicants,
Mhm.
that should go to Scott before it comes
Mhm.
to us.
Sure,
So
Yeah.
here,
makes
in
sense.
section 1303, the following shall require site plan review and approval. Any change of use, now that change of use is that defined term earlier. You don't, wouldn't be a good use of our own ordinance to have redefined it. Any change of use in which the intensity of use, as reflected in traffic generated, impacts on municipal services, the environment and surrounding neighborhood would differ in a substantial way from that of the preceding use. I don't see that. Right?
Yeah,
I'm very
again, I'm not
uncomfortable
trying to
with
make a judgment here.
No,
all
we
I
just
said
want to
is-
respect the planning board.
Right.
That's our concern.
Right.
John is.
But the very nature of the conversation I'm hearing is what you do in the planning board. So you guys
Yeah.
are now acting like the planning board.
Well, we're acting as
You're
interpreters.
looking at the ordinance.
You say
You're
you
doing
guys.
everything the planning board can do.
Right.
You say you guys.
And Joe and I just heard about this half hour ago.
Okay, well, let's proceed with our initial motion, which was to approve the liquor license. So we have a motion and a second, we've had discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so do we have a new motion?
Did you make one before mine?
Well, now, that one was, we're just gonna send it back to the planning board for them to review
To Scott.
and be back to
So
discuss.
we're not gonna make it conditional.
We don't want to make it conditional. We want them just to go
I
through.
move that we grant the liquor license condition on planning board review.
Code enforcement, and then it would have to say code enforcement and then potential planning board review.
And that we educate our town staff on how to help our small businesses manage our house.
Mhm.
Because that's what I'm comfortable with. Yeah, it's not right.
I'll second that.
Can I, if I presented Scott Bickford and ask, is this a change of use, and he says no, what is my next step then?
Well, we are,
We're not gonna
we are.
generate
Scott-
Scott Bickford says it's not a change.
If Scott says it's not a
Again.
change of use.
Right, I didn't come here to say that it was a change of use. I just came to express my concern in that it appears that there's a change in what they're doing. I didn't have any idea if there were changes of hours. I didn't have any information. So I'm not passing judgment.
No, I don't, that's not the way I'm taking it at
So I'm not
all.
voting against it.
I'm taking it,
No, I'm
just
just
raising the
curious, what do I do?
Yeah.
No, wait, what are the two options?
Yeah. No, it's very educational.
What you said,
We could have a motion that says we approve the liquor license conditioned on Scott Bickford determining that it's not a change of use.
Right.
We could.
I would say the planning office. That's maybe a better way to say it. Because I know Ryan gets involved in those two.
Yeah.
The planning office determines, and that's always the way it works. They determine whether it's a change of use.
So the CEO. Okay.
All right, so the motion I have is we will grant the liquor license on approval from code enforcement planning office that it is not a change of use. Is that correct?
I think that's okay.
Okay.
It's getting shady here.
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, no, but I mean, all of a sudden, you're saying it depends on them if it's not a change of use, right? What if they say it is a change of
Then
use?
it has to go
Then
to
it
the
would have to
planning
go to the planning board.
Well,
We don't determine change.
I understand that, but I mean,
So
So
she's to
Scott-
go to Scott. If Scott says it's a change of use, it has to go to planning board.
okay,
If Scott says it's not a change of use,
yeah, I
then
understand, I
she
understand,
should get her liquor license.
I understand.
Clear? Everybody?
Okay, so we have a motion from Denise. Do we have a second?
Second.
Well, that, okay, so now, the second tab, that could all be done without having you vote to approve it on condition of.
No, we want to get the liquor license issued if it's appropriate.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that they know that it should be brought back to Scott. Scott can review it, confer with the planning board, and that all can take place.
Scott doesn't confer with the planning board, correct?
No.
Scott makes
No.
the decision if it's a change of use.
Not typically.
Okay.
He could,
Right.
but
But
not.
that, those types of things can happen without us giving approval, yeah.
Well, why make her wait? If Scott says it's not a change of use, then why make her wait and come back? If Scott says it is a change of use, then she can go through the planning board process and it would come back when that's all reviewed and done.
And,
Go ahead, I'm
and
sorry.
then would that affect, if it takes, you know, a month to get to Scott, to get him to approve it, and then the planning board has to go through them to say, yes, it is a change of use, and go up in front of them, then will my application for the liquor license with the select board be expired and I have to resubmit everything?
I'll ask you on that because I don't know the application process.
No, you could use the same application, but,
And fee?
well, that's right. That's why the timing of when it's approved versus not approved is important on this. So what I'm understanding is signatures on that page, basically of the application, when they say yes, would not be applied by the select board until that review had occurred by Scott, right? So then after, if he determined, what I'm understanding from the motion as it sits, is that if he determined that it did require further review, we would hold the application as it sits today. You'd go through the process with the planning board to presumably obtain that change of use if needed. And once that was approved, their signatures would go on the application and you'd be able to come by. Again, the biggest cost for that fee is actually in Augusta, not in here. So we would hold that as well. So that way, when you were ready for that jump off point, away you go. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So can you help her in facilitating getting this in front of Scott?
Sure.
Sooner than later?
Absolutely.
Because what I don't want is it to be under a pile of something.
Mhm.
I would like to get it in front of Scott so that he
Mhm.
can make the determination, is it a change of use or not? And if it is, that gives her adequate time to get your application in so that she can make sure
Right.
she's on your agenda and then come back to us.
Yep,
I don't
absolutely.
want any of those things to be delayed so
Right.
that it causes now
Right.
an application problem
Right,
and another fee.
Right.
We could
So-
be ready for the 23rd.
right.
If Scott's
Which
in
is-
10 days, then
yeah.
Right,
10 days
that's
away.
coming up, right, it's
Yeah.
coming up quickly, so. Okay, so the motion we have right now is to grant the liquor license contingent on the approval from Code Enforcement Planning Office that it's not a change of use. If it is a change of use, it will then go through the planning board process. Denise was a motion, Eric, you
Second.
second that. Any further discussion?
Sorry. I also wanted to ask, I know that you have to publicly list it. Any applications for liquor license or renewal 10 days in advance, would you need to redo that listing?
Do you mean on the public hearing that we do, or?
I'm not entirely sure. It's what I spoke
Okay.
about with Linda at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
So I don't know the process super well,
Yeah.
but when she talked me through it, she said, okay.
Right.
you
Yeah,
have
so
have
what
it
we
by
would
this
have to
date,
do
Public
is at our
these
next,
days.
so what would happen is if you went through planning board, at our next meeting, we would, at the very beginning, do a public hearing like we did today, which it would get published the 10 days in advance, you wouldn't have to do that,
Yeah.
right?
I just want to make sure for
of that.
timing wise.
Right.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Because we're what, March 13th is the next
Yes.
meeting?
That's right.
So we have a motion and a second. So approval of granting the liquor license and approval from code enforcement planning office determining if it's not a change of use. If it is, then it will go through. All in favor? Okay, thank you. And thank you. And John, thank you in advance for getting that on.
Yeah.
Scott's radar tonight.
We have a great plan.
I've been in 25 years of approving liquor licenses. I've never had someone from the planning board come forward.
We haven't, so thank
and say
you.
that this-
Well, again,
No,
I think you all know the planning board is pretty business friendly. We certainly don't try to get anybody's way.
Well, I never
This-
thought of it as you had presented it today, so it is a valid point. We'll look at it and,
Yeah.
let's try it forward.
Okay, so next is Samoset. So we have a motion for approval. This is a renewal.
Who's the renewal of the Samoset license?
Second.
Okay, Jen. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And the next is track, also a renewal.
And we approve the renewal of the trash liquor license.
Do you have a second on that?
Second.
Jen? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
I hope this isn't right, but we can stay a little while.
All right, next we will act on the committee work plan for the recreation committee. So who's presenting that to us? Jason?
Go ahead, Jason.
Jason?
What's your,
Hi.
hi.
What do they have, John? I didn't see it.
They have probably everything that you, they have the work, well, so this is the work plan right now. So just go over the work plan right now.
All right, Diane gave me something different, sorry.
Well, that's later on. That's a different,
It's another one.
We
yeah, you
two
have
for you.
three.
We have three for you?
Yes,
I
yeah.
have a whole bunch.
It's a lot of Jason.
Okay. Let me
I'll
get
go
to
here for
your.
it.
Yeah, go for it.
work
You
plan.
blow it up.
So the rec committee, we took off January, but we just met in February to discuss the upcoming season. Unfortunately, with Marge Jones, for people that don't know, you can't see into the facility from Route 90. This was the busiest year we've ever seen there. The parking lot was full on a regular basis with Little League, baseball and softball, Legion ball, Babe Ruth. There was times cars were all the way up to Route 90. So things have picked up over there. The work plan, the first item we have on there is the main entrance from Route 90 or West Street in around to the tennis courts is really bad. Potholes are fixed on a almost every other month basis. So we're looking to get some funding for paving, get that portion of the road, high traffic area fixed. Parking is a big issue. We have cars parked along the road. It's a safety issue for kids there. So we're looking to add some more parking. It's a topic of discussion in reference to where that parking is going to go. We're still looking into that. We are looking to purchase an AED to put in the concession stand. Every year there's a fatality somewhere in the country on Little League fields with kids. Balls being hit in the chest can put kids into cardiac arrest. So we're looking to purchase an AED to put in the concession stand. And then the topic of which we're going to go over later, that's the later one. The capital campaign that we are looking to present to you with 3 different phases with fixing the property up. It was built 25 years ago and it's been, I wouldn't even go with limited maintenance. The tennis courts, basketball courts, you'll see in the pictures are pretty deplorable. Cracks in the basketball courts that are bigger than 6 inches. It's really bad. So that's the next presentation. And then relocate the playground. So when the facility was built, the playground was put all the way up by the tennis courts, so closest to Route 90. So during the springtime, all the parents with baseball and softball can't see their kids out by the playground. It's a concern for parents. and it's about 20 feet from the road. So we are looking to relocate it all the way to the back of the property where a parent could sit and watch Little League baseball and softball with their kid right next to them. We actually had Robbie Ames, who's a local contractor, go in just before the big freeze with his excavator, and he has one of the grinders on it. And he cleared an area out on the pad out there for us, so we're prepping it already. On his way out, he cleaned some of the road edges to widen it back out, and he's getting a price for us to thin the wood line all the way out to Route 90 to open it up. It'll also help dry that property out. It's really wet in that area. So we're looking to widen and clean out that entire area as well. So that's the main work plan. Like I said, we'll go over the capital campaign to do some fundraising to hopefully get the courts redone. Again, it's been 25 years since the courts were put in and they've never been resurfaced or fixed.
All right. Any questions for Jason?
Board for the Recreation Committee work plan as presented.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
All
Great job, thank you guys.
Okay. We're kind of out of order, Jason. We'll come back to you. So the next item we have is to act on Maine DEP reallocate of the ARPA grant. So John, want to walk us through this?
Yes. So at the workshop that you had held a couple weeks ago, board heard obviously about the status of ongoing investigation of wastewater treatment needs, short but particularly long term. And there was a lot that was covered that evening from what could be done to Rockland, a move to Rockland and a cost of working with the city of Rockland at a cost of $13 million. There was some discussion, but not a great deal. But obviously the board is very familiar of where things stand with the town of Camden and the relationship and current litigation the town is in with the town of Camden concerning wastewater treatment. And so through that process, there were a number of different items that were brought up, but obviously the funding sources were key in that. And one of those funding sources highlighted was a grant that the town had received in the amount of $1 million to be used towards the Route 1 project. So what this action would do is inform Maine DEP the town wishes to reallocate those funds on a one-time basis. This is a one-shot situation. Either you use this and you reuse this for a different use, or it must stay towards Route 1. And this project, it does not indicate the who, what, where, when, and why of what treatment, where the WRF, what the WRF ends up being. It merely informs Maine DEP that you plan to dedicate those funds towards that purpose. So I know that there has been a lot of conversation over the last few days. I've received a number of emails. The board received emails as well about what would be decided and discussed tonight. And this decision is really about the allocation of that funding source that the town has effectively already received. Does not require any other requirements of the what specifically that will entail. And I think from the conversation you all had, and all that's required of you at this point by Maine DEP is not to define that. And I think that from what I gather from your meeting, and perhaps you can discuss, there's still a great deal of information and data gathering needs to be done to determine the who, what, where, when, and why aspect of this. But there is a timetable in trying to let Maine DEP know what happens with these funds. So that's why it's on your agenda tonight.
What we're trying to do here is to protect that money for the use of the town golf course.
Right.
And that we make any decisions on what kind of wastewater recovery facilities put in, where we put in.
Nothing.
And
Correct.
there will be, and I think all of you are probably here tonight for this topic.
Mhm.
I think it's important for people to know that, when was it, last week or on the 30th, was the first time any of us saw any of the recommendations. That's not an approval of those, it is just, those are the initial recommendations that have come this way. So I think it's important that people realize that, there will not be decisions made unless there's public input, there's public vote. This truly is to make sure we don't lose $1 million. And that we have $1 million that we can reallocate to something else, something else to be determined. So I don't know, do we want to make the motion and then we can get into discussion and,
I move the board formally request that the new DEP reallocate the $1 million ARPA grant from the Route 1 sewer extension project to the WRRF project to allow the town to continue forward with preliminary planning, funding, local approval, and design efforts.
Second.
any discussion? Board? I'll open it up if there is any discussion or comment from.
Sure, I'm not clear on, is this an abandonment of the Route 1 project, or is this extra money?
Extra.
Yeah, it's extra.
In the budget.
Right, we came in under budget on the project, and this was an application. At one point, we'd applied for $2 million for that. We only received one. We were very disappointed in this for obvious reasons. But when the ARPA funds came around, so that was before I got here. But when I got here, there were funds available from ARPA that the state could allocate to a variety of projects such as this, Route 1 being one of them. So we did not need to use any of that money from Route 1 because we were under budget. And so DEP is allowing us effectively to use these funds for another purpose that they deem of high value to them as well.
So to follow up, does the transfer of this money to this new project force us down that road rather than continuing? Does it hinder continued negotiations with Camden, for example?
Well,
That's a good question. Yeah.
One is the price of what we owe them for past services. And the other is the future, but they have already notified us that they will only accept our wastewater until April 2026.
So, in part of that, if I can just sort of dovetail in, there's not a one of us that are sitting here that have not exhausted on trying to speak with Ken. Denise and I have done back channels with their representatives, and they are unwilling to talk with us. Period. So, and we can't sit and wait until 6 months before the deadline. So we're trying to get something lined up. What that is, we don't know, but we're not going to wait until we have to. We're trying to get proactive.
And anyone who was in Camden on Thursday or 2 weeks ago watching the manhole covers bubble up like fountains and all the restaurants were closed because they were flooded out, we've got some serious issues over there. On dry days, all the capacity is below. But on wet days, they've got some system problems and they were releasing raw sewage into the harbor.
What question on that?
Yeah, I'm follow up on Sam's a little bit. It saddens me to feel that the two towns cannot work together on a sewage treatment
agree.
facility.
We
I mean,
absolutely
we
agree.
share. So anyway, what's the point of, what's Camden's issue? Why are they just?
Because their systems.
Their
cannot
systems failed.
accommodate on rainy days.
That's what I figured it must be.
And they've let, I mean, I'm not trying to slander anybody, but they have a lot of infiltration issues with stormwater and their old sewer pipes.
Why don't we try to help them out to fix that? I mean, if we're gonna spend $13 million for our own system,
18.
wouldn't it be better to spend the money to help Camden fix theirs? Instead of having Camden, if we build our own facility, Camden still has that same problem.
Go ahead. In the back.
There's newspapers in this area. Why don't you go to them with this issue about you?
We
We're
have,
trying to take the high road. Apparently that's not working. No, but I mean, we don't, there's still hope, but not much.
There is also active litigation too, so I mean, we can't
Yeah.
speak of a lot of that, right? Joe, and then we'll go to the back.
Yeah, it's just we looked at like a third-party arbitrator or something to try to then break some of the deadlocks here. Again, I guess I just echo some of the other opinions. I would hope that we, as all reasonable people, can find a way to come to a solution for everybody.
Right. I mean, we very much would like to do that. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get that done yet.
It may change in June, but I'm not sure.
Go ahead, in the back.
My question is whether the litigation may be part of the reason that they're not willing to talk. If there's ongoing litigation on part of this issue, is that preventing them from being able to have
No.
a conversation?
They wouldn't talk
If
prior
this was
to
prior and then they,
Who's they?
Camden,
the
the
board, the
board,
manager.
select board, town manager,
It's a select board?
and town manager.
and the manager.
If I could try to give just a brief, because there's a binder already, as you'd imagine, right? So I showed up in July of 2021. This board, or members of this board who had been here before I showed up, they had been talking extensively for about 6 months with representatives from the town of Camden, whether it was the superintendent, members of the select board, managers, the list. And they set a budget because they felt that they could substantiate a rate to this point and wanted to have a conversation. So I came on the door and my feeling was, in fact, in this room, I invited all the principals, no decision makers, because sometimes, no offense, but sometimes they can get in the way of these things. Let's just talk staff to staff and see if we can work this out. And it was a bit of a disheartening conversation, to be honest with you. I thought, fresh eyes. I have no dog in this fight other than I've lived here my whole life. What more could have happened? And unfortunately, it went nowhere. It went nowhere fast. I think that the board, myself, various individuals who've black channels and the like through this time, I think there's a strong feeling from the town of Camden that they've staked out the right position in this issue. They think that they are undoubtedly right, and they could be. And I don't want to speak for the board, but for me, they could very well be 100% right. We're 100% wrong. But if any of us in this room had an issue, I'd hope I could talk to any of us and try to work out, okay, why do you think where you are? Why do I think where I am? Let's try to find common ground and find some sort of solution. And that's the difficulty we've had through this whole situation, is just trying to understand, let's walk a mile in the other person's shoes. And I think that's been a bit of the challenge through this. Is we've tried, I would say, 5 or 6 different
We're reasonable people.
methods.
Right? Nobody
Feel
wants
like
to
it.
spend their time going back and forth.
They could be having a meeting saying the same thing.
They could.
Yeah.
They absolutely could. You're right, Joe.
During a time when we were looking at our I&I problems, we found several people that hooked up solid drains that were going into people that hooked up, we didn't know it hooked up. The meter down at the end of the street was 20% off in their favor. We corrected our problem. But during this time, we found out that the contract that was in place for 30 years had expired by over a year. So.
Well, we knew, we were ahead of the game, we didn't just find out.
Well, no, but I mean,
Right, we
during-
tried to negotiate.
Right, during this time, but the initial comments were,
Let me tell you
We
the
think
initial
what-
comment.
we think
We
what-
are in no hurry,
Right.
and I quote, "We are in no hurry to come up with a new agreement."
we think what you're paying is fair.
So that was the quote.
So that was the very first thing, not somewhere down the road.
Eric, I think you were with me in that meeting.
And over time, the position changed from, we're not gonna talk to you about the sewer rate and the structure of the agreement, we've now decided we're not gonna take the wastewater. And he sent a strongly worded letter saying, no, you can't just do that. And that's where they came up with the April 2026 deadline.
And there's a lot in between all of that, but
Right.
we, the 5 of us have been more than willing to sit down and talk with any one of them, all of them. here we are.
So if we can't see it, I mean, you can see it coming already, right? I mean, you've been at it for 2 years and you're not getting anywhere. So what's that definition of insanity or whatever it is? We're not gonna get there.
Right.
And Camden's also subject to an enforcement order because of all the they've been, putting through sewers and all that sort of thing. And those things don't go away easily or cheaply. So that you're pushing a rope uphill with them, and that's from the outside looking in and just looking at the situation as a whole.
And, we're not tonight, I guess, presenting information because we're really just making a decision on a very discrete issue here with respect to the grant. But as we get into the public meetings, there's some scary numbers when you look at the cost of a new wastewater recovery facility for Rockport. But when it gets, the combination of grant money applied to the time period over which it operates and the sewer users, the rates are more affordable than
Much lower than what
Rockport users are currently paying. So it ends up being a good investment for our Rockport sewer users.
Along with a great deal more growth.
Gives us a little more control over our growth also, because Camden is definitely not interested in any sewer going out on the line.
And to send it all to Rockland was what, 13?
That's $13 million.
And that's just what we have now. That's not any expansion. So, I mean, you have to think down the line. Right.
Just to add real quickly, to Taylor and Martha's point, it saddens me greatly that two towns who work so well together on so many different projects can't seem to find a way to get on the same page on this. It's mind-boggling to me that we can't.
There's gotta be
You know?
some sticking point that's not apparent to me.
I feel the same way. I feel the same way.
It goes beyond whatever the sewer issue is.
I think they're trying to reduce the flow that goes into the system, which will help them buy more time with DEP because they have a problem.
And they're underinvested.
Well, we underinvest in stuff too, so.
That's very true.
What happens after April? Camden, you were saying we have till April
2026.
So what happens after that?
Well, if we don't have a new sewage plant online, with the recovery facility coming online, we'll have been in discussions with DEP leading up to that. The DEP has made it very clear
We
that
can't just
they
shut us.
Right.
So we're operating in good faith to address the issue. And DEP will.
And we didn't just stop paying, we have continued to pay a fee that our people thought was right.
But not what Camden is.
Well, they continue to want to go
That's
to
the
the old,
lawsuit, right.
they want to go by the old contract and the numbers from that. So we haven't not wanted to pay, we have continued to pay, they've continued to cash the check, and we're trying to still talk to them.
So if and when this new one comes online, you said that the lifetime of that, what is the lifetime of that new one if it happens, when it happens?
Lifetime.
Yeah, we haven't.
Camden's, for instance, is a 50-year.
They've been in operation there for 50 years, and they're undergoing a $15 million
You said it's
upgrade.
30 million to send it to Rockland,
Correct.
which is a lot of money.
Correct.
But if we're gonna put 8 million for one that's good for 10 years,
Right.
maybe that 13 million is better well spent.
I think we're looking in the 30 to 50 and beyond rather than a short-term solution. Yeah.
Is any of that material we have at the workshop available that we might be able to print out?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I just think because
There's a lot of interesting, there really is a lot of interesting stuff in there and pictures and diagrams and.
And partly, and just for those who are uninitiated in this, workshops are really chances for the board to sort of gather information. They can't make decisions in those circumstances. So this is the first time really they've been talking, so congratulations, Jay. This is the first time really they've had a chance to talk about what they learned that night. And so there's been no direction from the board to me and the rest of the staff to make anything happen. But, we have our newsletter. Unfortunately, we don't have an opera house to hold a big gathering that people come in, but the library, it was different places we could hold events to bring people in to share what we know, because I think people, honestly want to hear.
Of course they do. I mean, let's face it. I think example was that they wanted it in Kramer Park. Like I said, last week or whenever this session was the first time that it was brought up as a potential solution or the solution, I think, is what people are concerned about, and that absolutely is not the case. There were several solutions, but based upon, location and the ability to pump from one place to another, that was logically the location that kind of rose to the top. We asked the very same questions, right? Like, well, show us everything else and show us why something else ranked lower, because, I'm gonna be honest, if I lived in the village, my question would be like, I don't want that in my backyard, like, who wants to overlook that, right? I mean, so, so those, right, exactly. So, I mean, I think that, I'm sorry?
Who proposed this initial idea of putting it in Kramer Park?
Yeah, so it came from Woodward Curran. I always say their name wrong. Right, exactly. So they looked at several.
Do they live in the village? Or do they live in Rockport, period?
No, so,
They're who handle our wastewater today. So they're our consultant. And they looked at multiple locations that are either town-owned or not town-owned, that could be potentially acquired. And, came up with some initial recommendations. Again, they are initial recommendations. But of course, when you read it in the paper, what does it sound like? It sounds like that it's going in Kramer Park, and we're gonna see it there next week, right?
I mean, even if it didn't live.
Well, let's not jump, I wanna just, they did think about it, and they understand. that
They
it's
do,
controversial.
absolutely.
But you also need to have it be in a place where it can get discharged to a water body at any determination. And that's just,
What about the eels in that?
well, there's a lot of issues.
Some
I'm not,
Yeah,
yes,
there's-
it's not a good
And I
deal,
think
but
that's
there
answered.
are good reasons. that
Right, and I think that's answered in that report, I think, that was presented to us, that it meets or exceeds any of the current DEP requirements for
Requirements, right.
discharge.
Exactly.
that's correct.
And it's not your standard system that's in place now, it's probably the most advanced that there is currently. So I would gladly,
I think that information.
print some of those up.
Yeah, I
It's all
agree.
self-contained, there's a big, name of the game these days is disguising it, so they look like houses, you don't even know. it's
Well,
a house.
there's one in Lincolnville that's
Right.
Yeah.
that is the same system in
Mhm.
Lincolnville.
Yeah.
So as you're going north
Now,
into
yeah,
town,
where is that?
if you're
Right
going
at the
north into
beach.
Lincolnville, just going down the hill,
Oh, yeah.
and you look,
Yeah.
there's that lobster pound that's off to the right that you have to make that harder turn to get into.
Yeah.
That's where it is.
Oh, I never.
Right on Route 1.
You
We're on
won't-
Route 1.
You'll
Right.
drive right past it and not even know what it is.
Yeah.
But it's mostly in the ground, and then there's a small
Small
building,
building.
it's about half the size of this room. And it's all contained in the ground. Air emissions issues aren't the same. Water discharge issues aren't the same. I know you're all thinking of like Rockland's plant or some of the other ones, you drive by and you go, what the heck is that? It's not the same kind of.
But that's
One
why
day
it's
of it malfunctioning in the summer, and there goes all the tourists out of town.
Well, and
They're all
that's,
gonna stay at the hotel.
that's actually why I'm here on behalf of reflecting the comments from the Conservation Commission. Because we're empowered, or we're asked, however it is, to both educate the public and to look after the natural resources that the town has. And there's water quality expertise, folks like Bob Kennedy, Jeff Runge, they do this for a living. There's other expertise on the commission as well, I'm not gonna go through it, but one of the concerns we have is that we end up with a process that engages those entities, whether it's us, whether it's Harbor, whether it's parks with respect to using that. We haven't seen yet any process or words or anything that reflects how that's going to be taken into account with respect to this design. I mean, I get Woodard Kern, they're a good bunch, they're smart, I've got friends that work there, blah, 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 based on our history. But they don't live here. And they don't live on the harbor, they don't worry about elders. For instance, we've got, Enterococcus bacteria is a scanner we're gonna have to hit, that's what's coming off. The permit for Lincolnville is 8, called seafood for 100 milliliters, but just think of 8. Well, we've already got 50 to 200 in the Goose River, based on what's already in there. Because we sample every month all summer long. So how's that 8 coming off of the permit? You go sampling in the Goose River and it's already 200, somebody's gonna raise Cain. All right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, and so there's a lot of issues, and then we're gonna have more fresh water going into the harbor.
Mhm.
How much more? I don't know. I mean, what, 200 gallons a minute, 300 gallons a minute, what does that mean?
Mhm.
There's expertise that can handle that or can help assist with that, and that's why I'm here, reflecting the comments of the Conservation Commission, because they're looking at all this and they're all hitting me going,
Well, sure.
well, but, I'm like, no, they're
Right.
just
No,
getting
but you're
started.
absolutely
Right, absolutely.
But we need a process that we don't currently understand,
Mhm.
so that I can kind of help with those experts and say, well, and this isn't an approval thing. It's
It's
just
an
based on,
information, it's
yeah,
a.
it's all the expertise
Right.
that the commission and others have
Mhm.
ought to be reflected into that.
Absolutely.
When it comes, I mean, personally, I think the permit's gonna be the hardest thing to get out there.
Mhm.
Building it, that's easy, it's just money. But the permit's emotions, it's people getting upset, saying, what's gonna happen when?
Mhm.
And the other issue is that August is when we have the least amount of flow coming out of the Goose River. It's nothing.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a trickle, right? It
Mhm.
won't be a trickle anymore, but that trickle is gonna be ours. Okay? Yes. So, what's gonna happen in the river? Is it gonna change the salinity? Are you gonna be changing ecosystems? Is that Goose River gonna turn green because of some upset condition? We've got too many nutrients going in, when all of a sudden the algae goes, ha, this is great. And all of a sudden, we got soup. All right, so those are all the what ifs. And so we're asking, all right, let's involve some of the expertise that the town already has on the commission and elsewhere and say, let's participate in the process.
So John, can we speak to, because I know we had the workshop and
Mhm.
they presented us the kind of initial
Mhm.
thoughts. Have you thought more about what those next steps will be? Because I know we talked about getting some public meetings
Mhm.
together, sharing the information. So anything you can share on that of kind of what the next steps will be?
Well, I think first and foremost, direction from the board in terms of pursuing public engagement. So I think if that is absolutely where we want to go, then sharing what we already know is the best way we can do that. Whether it's the slideshow that you all reviewed, which I think is a pretty good explanation as to what the path to go from problem and a deadline of 2026 to how do we meet that need. But then secondarily, there's issues of siting. Where do you go with the siting? There was a slideshow that Nada referred to that talks about that. I don't know that as that's currently written really does the job because it's a bit more technical. And I think it needs to be redrafted. I talked with Orion today about that, about setting up some small community meetings, small groups, 5-6 folks, and just talking about where we are. We're a bit limited in terms of our usual locations. I mean, usually we have the big sort of conversations, but take small groups of residents and talk about the issues, and we could schedule them through the day here and 10, 12. That's true too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I don't even want to begin to. I wish I knew.
But I mean, we potentially could use Masonic Hall or
Yep.
the West Rockport Church, like we did
School.
for the school. I mean, there are options.
Absolutely.
To be able to bring people together, but I think
Mhm.
I think we need to start to do that sooner than later. And to
Mhm.
Mark's point, share the information that was shared with us. I mean, there's nothing in there that's
Mhm.
secret that people should
No.
know.
Yeah.
And to your point, we have a lot of experts in this community.
Right.
Let's get them together. Let's get them to look at it. Let's get them to kind of poke the holes, the 5 whys, and have we considered all of these things so that we can go into this fully with our eyes open and understanding what the challenges are and what the concerns of the community will be, so that we can make the right decisions.
And for the budget books that are, as I'm looking at them across the table, there's a 50% increase in the water monitoring budget for the Conservation Commission in that budget. So that's a step.
Which is already a small budget.
That's a step.
Yeah, and we considered that, and candidly, one of the
Mhm.
conversations we had last week, when we were notified that we had to come up with a budget, was, well, let's do all this stuff for the wastewater treatment plant, and don't use those words.
Yeah,
Okay?
Baseline.
Don't use other words. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. But there are some things that need to be done.
Yeah.
So that we can better understand.
Right.
Because, you go through a permitting process, you're just asking permission of the
Mhm.
regulators, that's all they sell, they don't
Mhm.
sell anything. They don't care, they just go, check, check,
Mhm.
check. Here
Right.
we go.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we want it that way,
That's right.
all right? And how you want it is, we don't want any changes. And if we do have a change, we know what it's gonna be.
Mhm.
And that's the issue behind
Exactly.
getting that sort of front ended.
Mhm.
And then if you can explain that to everybody in the front at these sessions, you can go, look, I understand now. You know, like it, but you at least understand it.
And that's part of what we're doing. I mean, whether it's foolishly optimistic for me to think, which I still think we can work with Camden, in maybe not the near future, but this year perhaps. We can't rely on that alone. We have to think ahead. And this is just a very raw picture of what's ahead looks like. So,
Well, I mean, there was a,
We haven't given up on.
No.
We also said we need to be looking at travel tax.
yeah, we do have a very little conference.
We've been given,
and there was a feasibility study on this done a year ago. March.
Right.
22.
22, yeah.
Everybody should read that. I mean, that also has a lot of this stuff in it already.
Mhm. That's right.
Anticipated flows and how much water is going to be coming in. Down the road, you're talking about 700 gallons a minute. Okay, that's a lot of water. That's high end down the road. Right now, it's about 300. But even 300 in August is going to look like 300.
One of the things, and if anybody's familiar with Camden, the site is quite huge. It takes a big piece of property. And I think in our conversations the other day, what we're looking at here, and I know this doesn't ease where it had been suggested to go, but only takes up an acre of property. It's on a smaller stamp than what the Camden site is.
For anybody, I don't mean to, but the concern with siting the facility, as Denise said, you have to get the water. It's got to get to the high. So, things like Harkness Brook, that'd be the res site. Harkness Brook dries up, and we really can't use that. And I'm not part of this process, don't get me wrong, it's just me, having read enough. Ock Brook, through the woods over there, that dries up. I mean, so the problem is, challenge is, what do? Do you process the water and then take an expensive pipeline to get somewhere? I mean, that's another, I might as well throw a whole bunch more dollars at that.
It could be at the head of the harbor with that pump station currently.
Yeah, so there's, there's legitimate technical reasons, and I'm not saying it's political, but the technical side that says, this is what we gotta do it. Now it's gotta figure out how to do it, so it doesn't put everybody, in the fun of it.
Yeah, we just don't know enough yet about, how it works and what the potential benefits are and
Absolutely.
the potential environmental impacts, we just don't know enough, so, we kind of couple and.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good reason.
So go look at Lincolnville, Lincolnville system now. Lincolnville, you gotta remember, is permitted for like 25,000 gallons a day. We're talking about more than 10 times that.
Lincolnville only serves a small part of the one.
Right, so it's a
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
capacity.
Very small.
So whether the footprint of a Rockport system, I'm not saying it's gonna be 10 times the Lincolnville system, that doesn't make any sense, but when you look at Lincolnville, you go, that's nothing. Because it is, it's very little.
It only
But
serves
it's-
the properties that are along Route 1. We're willing to pay to put that.
Right, and it's 25,000 gallons, and I think we're looking at, I can't remember the exact number, but, it's much higher, 300,000, that thing versus 25,000. For all the right reasons.
And that's the capacity that we're building forward.
Yeah, exactly, and I think the back capacity is like 1 million gallons a day, but that's a much bigger number. So I guess my point is that don't take my word that it's just the Lincolnville footprint, but the system is small.
But
I think for our flow, Mark, I think it was like, what, an acre, like they
Yeah,
thought
that's
it
what
was
he-
about an
That's what he
acre
told
for
us, the site.
the building, the,
Yeah, it was,
Storage,
it was a
so-
million gallons, I remember that.
that's the
Maximum.
yeah, the
Yeah.
max.
About 300,000 was the current
Yeah.
version of what
Yeah.
reality is.
What's the acreage of Kramer Park?
I can tell you.
Almost over an acre.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
it's bigger than, yeah, it's bigger than that.
I mean, definitely changes use.
Yeah.
It's a park that's big.
It is a change in
You
use.
think?
Joe, get ready for that.
A lot of trees are gonna have to be cut down.
There's a lot to be looked at.
There's a tremendous amount. So I mean,
They're not
that's good.
stable, you have to go to the big road, how stable is it on the line? All over the.
I think one of the disappointing for us, I mean, it's it literally is my backyard.
How
And
is it?
I don't think too many people understand just how much use that park is in the town. It's one of the few places in the village where you can, a small shop can run the right way or bikes. There's just not a lot of places like that.
What's the capacity of the chemical plant?
1.2 million gallons per day.
What goes into it on a normal day?
We, on the dry?
No, on a regular.
Yeah.
A regular day.
When it's,
But it's not
when it's,
really.
when it's sewage going.
Well, they won't share that number with us
I
right
bet it
now.
isn't 500,000 gallons. I bet it isn't 500,000.
I was about to say, but I know when
Yeah.
this issue came around quite a while ago, and at that time, Camden, the plant was severely underutilized, and they were.
Right.
Yeah.
Take a couple hundred, I think it was more or less the same amount that this man was talking to back then.
Mhm.
Having spoken to a former board member who was on the wastewater commission over there,
Yep.
50% is the number he gave me.
Sounds about right.
50%.
They're using
Yes.
50% of what we got, so they're not even anywhere near.
Well, we're still contracted, what, 150?
Yes, 160, 160 with the school.
160.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions. One, how would you get hold of the report that you said is available that talks about all
The
this?
feasibility study?
Yeah, the feasibility.
I've got it. We can send it, whoever would like it. Yeah, we can send that out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Another question, is there a time frame for this ongoing litigation? That's evidently-
I would love it done today.
As long as
Yeah.
long as there's money, the lawyers will be up ready.
So it's not installed, it's not going anywhere?
It's difficult to talk to the public about it, we engage in this investigation. So, it's happening.
Yeah.
And, okay, and the final question, is it possible that Rockport is the problem of the overload on the wet times with Camden?
No.
Is-
No.
even
There's no
they-
way.
Even they would think that was the case?
So our system effectively goes to the pump station just around the corner for you guys. And we heads up Cameron Street, and then it comes through the Rawson Avenue pump station, as you go across there. The manhole covers that were blown off on Bayview Street, that's a different section of their system entirely.
Not even connected.
No, and to give a sense of how much we send on an average day, we send about 75,000 gallons per day, about 7% of what they're authorized to do. So that's the hard part about this is when you look at the math, you're like, I just don't understand why we're having this conversation. There's a conversation to be had for sure, not that one. And for our users, they're paying rates that are among the highest in the state presently. So those factors, expired agreement, highest rates in the state, seemingly no end to those rates. And by the way, right, consent order, right, with the place we're sending the waste. You start putting these things together and you say, boy, that's a problematic future. Now what does the other solution look like? I think we lean on guys like Bill and other residents to help us figure out where that can go. But what's forced us into the position we're in for somewhat of a defensive posture. As Mark has said, we want to be prepared to have option A and option B available if we can.
Doesn't mean we're gonna do it. We just can't wait until the last a minute and try to figure out what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
I think we need a Knox County Sewer Commission that could take the local emotions out of it.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah, we've been through that with some of it. Any other comments?
Yeah, so first I'll sort of echo Bill's statements, besides being interested as a landowner and business owner in the very near vicinity. I'm also chair of the harbor committee and feel the same, want to be included in the discussion and used as experts in that field. And I'll speak to the Conservation Commission. I think Bill was too humble. He should have mentioned it. They've got 4 PhDs and 2 master's degrees that are very applicable, I think. So that's one point. In considering the cost of the system, in the same way that when I talk about the harbor budget and the revenue, I encourage the board to consider the value of the tax base that comes from the harbor. I think you could view that as this addition as a liability, towards my business, absolutely, towards the properties I own, and towards the taxes on, the harbor and the use of the harbor. So I want to ask a question that I don't expect that you should answer given the legal stuff going on. What if, it sounds like there is some animosity on Camden's side because of a decrease in a rate, that we're paying 20% less than we're paying, something like that. Is that
I think
accurate?
it's more nuanced. I mean, that's an issue, but the other issue is accepting our water. I mean, their select board has made public statements that we're tired of taking Lockport's wastewater and discharging it in our harbor. They should use their harbor.
And we were already told prior to us even figuring out what we were going to pay.
Yep.
That they weren't interested in renewing the contract and what we were paying was fair. That was the initial comment. And then we took the steps to figure out, well, we can't just not pay them anything. So we got our people involved and they came up with a fee that they thought was fair based on usage. And we've been continually paying that. And also trying to talk it.
So where I was headed, and I take your point, that may diminish mine some, but where I was headed was, what if, as a gesture of goodwill, would it be worth starting a conversation with Camden with, hey, let's talk about us paying a little more, on good faith that we can collaborate and make this work. And, without an answer to that, this motion that I think is maybe still on the table here.
I think so, yeah.
It is.
I think so.
But which does not decide the bigger question you're
Right.
talking about.
Yes, but I mean, it does, I think, they put us on a path, I mean, based on, what a technical expert has said. I mean, I think we're heading towards this Kramer Park solution. Could the motion be request of the state that we be allowed this money to pursue our own solution, possibly in collaboration with Camden?
Well, the motion doesn't dictate what we do with the funds, correct, from a wastewater
Right.
perspective. The motion is, we don't want to use it for Route 1 because that's done. We want to use it for some other wastewater project, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
And so that motion could contain the possibility that $1 million could be used for a collaboration with Camden.
I think so. I mean, it's a wastewater recovery. I don't know, John, you probably can
If
steer
it
us in the
doesn't,
right
I-
direction, but it doesn't look
I feel like,
promising.
I think the spirit of your question, I think everyone at this table agrees with. I don't think the door should be shut to collaboration, regardless of this motion, up or down, left or right. We're going to be neighbors regardless for a long time. So I think that's right. Well, we did have the whole bridge thing, it kind of started this whole mess, but but I think that this is very much sort of a bureaucratic piece of red tape that Maine DEP needs us to say, this project that's defunct, effectively, that's done and completed, we want to keep it alive for our current needs. They recognize these as very, very much pressing. They're very concerned about what has been said and what has been claimed next door. So I think that it really has to be a decision that this board and then eventually all of you make in the ballot, all of us, actually, me too, make it in a ballot box at some point. And so I don't, for example, there were a lot of conversations in the city of Rockland before we even got, down that road. And we found it was $13 million. But those conversations could go a lot of different ways. So I wouldn't even, I guess my suggestion is I wouldn't even suggest limiting that to one community or not. I think what's best for Rockport is really what I think is what they're considering and where these funds are meant to be reused for, I
Another
guess.
piece that hadn't been brought up that we had talked about that workshop night. Rockland is pretty restricted too
Mm-hmm.
about when we can send stuff that way, because they have a big, they have problems. They're willing to take it, but only between like every other Sunday at midnight to 6 in the morning. And
Overnight.
They never, I mean, there were a lot of restrictions.
what they're doing at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly
So,
right.
I mean, so that coupled with that, we're just looking at a bigger picture solution so that we're not obligated to either party. And future boards don't have to worry about contracts that expire unnoticed. Well, no.
But it should have been noticed like
It should have been
5
noticed.
years in
Right,
advance.
it should have been noticed.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Okay,
Last question.
sure.
Have you approached the town of Camden and asked them, would they like Rockport's help to try to solve some of their own infiltration problems, stormwater infiltration?
I personally have not. I don't know if those discussions have ever occurred.
I mean, I wonder if we're gonna be spending a fair amount of money
Yeah.
there, I wonder if that's a way to help bring the two communities back together, solve our problem and help Camden at the same time.
Yeah, you can definitely look into
I mean, that's another avenue that we hadn't done, but nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Right. Right.
It's,
One of you hit on it, maybe it was you, Denise, that they're facing enforcement. They may say they're only at 50% capacity, but if they got manhole covers blowing out of the ground.
Wet, dry days are almost irrelevant.
Yeah, so they're looking at potential massive infrastructure upgrades, capital investment, or trying to limit the amount of water they're taking, just kind of bleed the thing along. That's your answer right there. They don't want it.
well, that's what I
And that's the conclusion
Yeah.
I'm taking.
They don't want it.
They can't really afford to do the upgrades needed, I don't.
Well, that's the point, they're squeezed. So
Yeah.
the only way to push it along is with the duct tape is.
Yeah, kick out the extra, which is us and the.
There's some type of joint ownership.
Yeah, it gets tricky. It's interesting as we were discussing sort of capital upgrades and our share of those costs, because we can't bond for something we don't own. So it's, there's ownership and there will be more discussions for sure. We're not giving up. But it's not really,
No, I gather it's been frustrating all around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We feel like we got agreement, initially we had great agreement on the right path forward, and then the pandemic sort of hit, and people stopped talking, and then all of a sudden the whole landscape changed.
There's an entire market out there, it's a bad one, but plants like this, like Camden, the old ones, they put out to bid to engineering firms. I used to work for one, it's not obvious so far, but they put out bids wanting fixed fee guaranteed pricing to run those old plants. And we started looking at those, some of them were big towns, Atlanta and others. You walk in there and you realize, man, they've touched the damn thing for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And the reason they wanted fixed fee guaranteed price operating costs, and it included repairs, is is if they thought they'd find some suckers, they'll go ahead and do that.
Mhm.
So that's a market out there if you're so inclined. Somebody else is going to maybe, but the point is that they're not unique in terms of the age of that system, the amount of money that they're going to have to put into it. The whole country's facing it. The benefit we have to get some brand new technology is going to last until 40 years from now, people are going to be in this room screaming about this.
Their technology is very outdated, and they're gonna have to change it or upgrade it anyway, and it's gonna cost them 15 to 20 million or more.
Yeah.
So at some point, they're gonna have to do something. So because they're already dumping the pollutants that they're dumping into their harbor exceed limits most days.
And if you think about it, and I had mentioned it to a previous board member from Camden, that was one of our counterparts, because there are 2 board members, according to the old contract,
Mhm.
that are the representatives of the board, so Denise and I are that. We met with our counterparts. And there's just,
All right, any final comments?
I will make one that,
Absolutely.
I'll make it right laugh, but the consent order that Camden had to sign, they got their fine reduced by agreeing to a special environmental project, or SEPs, what they call it. So they had to pay Aldermere to about 10 grand to move their fences back from the creek that discharges in our harbor,
Mhm.
so that the cows pooping in the fields had to poop a little further from the water.
Mhm.
And Camden had to pay that money to Aldermere to fix our water. So maybe that's the one.
Yes, the cows, that's right. All right, any final comments? All right, we do have a motion on the board to request that Maine DEP reallocate the 1 million ARPA. We have a motion and a second, we have discussion, all in favor of the reallocation.
Don't want to lose the money.
No, do not want to lose any money. Okay.
No, but we will have a process.
Yes, yes, we will have a process.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you so much.
and reach out to John and get a copy of that stuff from the other day.
Yeah.
It's good reading, if you like that.
Might be good to set up a subpage on the town website.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very
I think
good
that's where we gotta
idea.
go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
We can find it.
Good thinking,
Yeah,
Joe.
yeah.
Instead of
So
back
to
and
get
forth.
back to one,
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
the
you.
town splitting along.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for the towns to get back together.
Oh, man.
That's one.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Good
Yeah.
luck with that, Taylor.
Well, no, but I mean, geez, we share, we share so
But look
much.
what we share, a lot.
It would be so much more efficient.
think about this, and I forgot about it earlier when I went blank for a minute, but we're paying currently probably a third of what we were paying. I think we were paying 320 or something to them a year.
A little less, but yeah.
300.
Yeah.
So now we're paying 120 or 30,000. And if we go our own way, they're gonna lose that. So they've already lost 200,000 because they won't caught. And they risk losing another 120 or 30 because they won't caught. And I mean, I just don't understand why they won't caught.
Are you saying we used to pay them 300, now we're paying them 100?
That's right. That's exactly right.
125, I think. So
Less than 100, actually, but yeah.
No wonder they're irritated.
Piss me off too.
But we found a lot of that had to do with the meter down here that pumped directly from Rockport into Camden, is 20% off.
Okay.
So that cut
Still a
back.
big cut.
True, but that was with the more up-to-date numbers. And it is still a big cut.
Yeah.
But we had to start somewhere, like I said, we weren't gonna not pay them something. But we were buying dump trucks, culverts, and other things that weren't
Rockport.
wastewater related. So we're trying to get them back into the fold, but we're working on it.
Bring the horse to water.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That rope up the hill with the,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Jump to the wall, whatever it
Oh, you'll be hearing from me. Don't worry, Bill. Thanks again.
Good night. Thank you.
All right, so we will,
You want to go up to the front?
come on up to the front, Jason. So we can act on a withdrawal from the recreation reserve.
That's nice that you got,
I just wanted to be noticed, I mean, I didn't think that we were going to have that conversation tonight.
Well, remember,
But it was good to have some terrible conversation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had no idea that, but it's a good chat. I hope everyone's watching or will be watching.
Well, at least we got the information out to a larger group of people than we normally would have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
So sorry, Jason.
And I have no problem with people, I understand people are concerned, and I want them to talk about it, so.
Yeah.
Because when, in the absence of information, as we know from some of the emails that we got this week, that information gets misconstrued and people kind of make up their own stories, and I want people to.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is we should send a card sincerely yours 1891.
All right, but we will move on and we will act on the withdrawal from the recreation reserve. So Jason, thanks for your patience.
Yes, ma'am.
So what is your reserve? What is your withdrawal?
Yeah, what's your withdrawal?
Do you have,
Okay, this is just the courts. No, I didn't do that because the
so
quote, just tell them what's on the quote, because
Yeah.
this is
There.
for Maine Track and Tennis. They're the only ones in the state of Maine. There's one other in New England and it's in Vermont.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting on their quote back. What I was told by
Mhm.
Craig
Mhm.
Wilson,
Wilson.
who manages MRC, it's going to be basically the same. They're pretty good. Anyway,
Okay,
what it is, they are about a year out. So in order for us to get on the list, we have to start getting money through them, XYZ. So the rec committee agreed. We currently have 42,000, 52,000
Mhm.
in the reserve. July we'll have another 10. Obviously, if the budget's approved for the reserve. But we are looking to pull the money out to start the project of resurfacing and remodeling both courts in conjunction with the capital campaign that you're going to see as well,
okay,
to start replenishing those funds as well as doing all the other projects that are on that, which you'll see after.
Okay.
These funds were put in there strictly for the courts. I don't know how long ago, Mark.
Over time,
Long,
right?
long time ago.
A little bit every year, right?
Everyone's talking about that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was put in there for this purpose a long time ago. As I've said, no one, including Steve, could verify that these courts have ever been touched. So when I say 25 years, I think it's a pretty accurate number. When they were built, that's
Yeah.
what they look like now. If
Yep.
you've been in, the tennis nets are all angled in, the posts are all bent right in, coming up.
There
It's-
hasn't been any love on those in a long time.
Basketball court, John, there's 6-inch cracks that kids could easily crack, break ankles. So the committee's agreed 100% that we've worked hard the last 2 years of the Sports Field of Maine
Mhm.
to completely remodel the fields. They put the fertilizer on it this year. They fixed the fences. Everything's been done. So we need to start moving now to the other.
So I'm looking at the motion because I'm okay doing it. I just want to not let you have to sit here very long and have it. But it says the board approved the withdrawal of 52,000 from the account,
Mm-hmm.
and you're asking in the manager's comments 47 with 52 total in there. So you're asking for 47 or
52. So this is where the replenishment comes in, because the work that they're going to do would exceed all the monies we have in the reserve now. The estimates, well, one of the estimates that I had gotten, that he has another one that's on top of that.
This is the current one. So from November to now, the prices have changed by almost $7,000.
So it's 47 now, it's 54.
Well, there's still things.
Go ahead,
The
go into it.
basketball, the basketball backboards alone are $12,000. That's not a part of this. So again, once the capital campaign starts, there's a ton of people that have already said they're willing to start donating. We got to get this going, but we have to start getting the funds approved so that I can start with Maine. So they're going to have a contract. I need to get that started. So I have to be able to say, here are the funds.
So you wanna take the full 52 is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Right.
You know, you already know for sure there's at least 47, it's probably more, and there's all these other things coming.
Oh, it's gonna be well over,
Okay.
just for those two
Weren't we
courts.
talking, weren't the courts like considerably more than that?
Yeah.
To rebuild.
Rebuild.
Mhm.
the
Oh, to
surface
rebuild, you're
then?
talking,
Is that
well,
like a couple hundred? or
just
something?
to do.
Yeah, I think so.
It's
That's right.
not on this one, just to build 4 pickleball courts, which are equivalent is $150,000.
That's what I thought, it was considerably more.
All right.
The board approved the withdrawal of 52,000 from Mark Jones Recreation Field Reserve.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Yeah.
All in
Yeah.
all in favor?
Gotta get that going
Okay.
Yes.
before
The
the price
next
goes
is
up.
to act
Mhm.
on the capital campaign for March Jones.
Yes, they've got they are sideways in their packet, but they have
So
everything.
this adventure advertising, Miranda and Dale worked with us on this as well as Jen Roper to get this put together. I'm not a pickleball person. I've never played it.
You can lock it so it won't flip.
It's very popular.
Oh my
It's-
gosh.
It's epic proportions on what people do for pickleball. There's a large contingency of people that I've been working with. They've been painting lines on the current courts. This one lady has guaranteed a substantial amount of people will donate to this fund to get not necessarily the pickleball courts built, but resurface the tennis court. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Resurface the tennis court. In doing the resurface of the tennis court, we will have alternate lines painted for pickleball. So there will be four pickleball courts in terms of how it works over there, including we're going to buy nettings. We're going to buy them, not a shed the size of what we had built, but a smaller shed where they can keep stuff in there for clinics and all this other stuff. What they'll do is they'll do tournaments over there. They'll reserve their time on the calendar, but they'll do tournaments. And what they've agreed to is a portion, 50% of the proceeds from the tournament will go back to not necessarily the capital, but to a fund for the park. So yeah, I mean, this is, we have all the phases on here, 2023, 24, with all of the information, backboard nets, like I said, lights on the courts, expansion is one of the big ones. You guys are in discussions with the RES property. That field is used a lot, so if something changes there, the rec committee wants to look at potentially adding on. There's a lot of land around us that could potentially down the road be acquired for soccer fields or other things of that nature. So that's part of the 2024. And then obviously the finish paving the facility, you'll see in the budget when you get to it. What we're looking to do is the rec committee has agreed it's probably not in our best interest to ask for $250,000 all at once. So what we're looking to do is do sections. So 25 grand potentially every single year. Within a 4 to 5 year time frame, the whole facility could be paved. We already have to put calcium down as soon as spring hits to prevent the dust because of the dangers when cars pull in. It literally fills everything. So the paving will be way down the road. Anyway,
So will that allow wintertime use of the pickleball courts?
I'm sorry.
Will wintertime use be allowed on these pickleball courts?
If you want to shovel it, you can. I will unlock the gate for you.
Where they actually have shovels and squeegees. You know, you get a day like
Wow.
Sunday.
The problem is, like, I plowed it out.
Maybe
I plowed
Oh,
it 3
the
weeks
road's not
ago
normally
so that
plowed.
Robbie could get his excavator in there,
Yeah,
and
it's
it
a
was
mess,
not
I'm
easy to
sure.
plow.
Yeah.
I plowed it 2 years ago and this year just once for 2 different projects, and it'd be a lot to keep that
And that
open.
road would really take a beating.
So when,
too.
Oh, yeah.
when these,
Unless it's paved.
Especially,
Right.
yeah. there you go.
It's paved,
Oh,
right.
wait.
when the monies come into the donations, will they go into?
We are going to open up a separate account, 100% separate account. Megan's already talked to the bank. It'll be everything will go directly into there. She'll manage it 100%.
And it's probably the worst kept secret in the world, but the field might, wink, wink, nod, nod, stay over here.
We'll see. So yes, a separate account would be, we're still, Dale and Alyssa, I believe are going to help us potentially set up an online, and they will pay the cost for a full year. I don't know how all that works.
Yeah.
So that you can,
You got
that's
to
why
do
there's a blank spot here. It's a barcode or a box or whatever
QR
it's called.
code.
QR code.
Thank you. You can scan it and it'll bring you to that link.
That would be great.
And because there's some people that would do it that way. So I believe we're waiting on that. But that would go in this box here, so that people could pay online. So,
More have to probably get some donations that way, right?
Yeah.
Because I can go
Writing
like
it
this.
and that's why he brought it up, was he goes, there's more people willing to do the QR code than write a check. He goes, when was the last time you wrote a check? And it's like,
Right.
not a lot of people do write checks anymore. So,
No, if you can get electronic processing on it, then you're way better off.
So we'd like to put this in the newsletter, town webpage, all the Facebook pages out there. I don't know where it's going to go. I mean, it could be a flop. I don't know. From what people said, they're willing to donate and they're going to pass the word.
Do you have like a group who's sort of heading this up?
The rec committee.
Okay, and you'll be like reaching out to people?
Oh, we're all going to work. Has MRC done theirs yet? Have they announced it?
I haven't seen it, no.
So the other thing is we want to get ahead of MRC. They got a campaign. They're building indoor pickleball courts, an indoor facility. So they're going to be doing their own little campaign. Craig asked, he's on our rec committee, and he kind of asked if I would push this off. And I understand they make money to stay open, but this is a public thing for us and it needs to be improved. So I was like, no, this place needs improvement. So.
I move the board endorses certain creation of the capital campaign for March, June.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
And along with that field over here that we can't talk about, there might actually be 4 of those specific courts that we can't talk about. But there's a lot of good stuff.
Back from them.
Yeah.
Maybe we might be able to work with her, because I know it may not be right up front. Maybe we can work with her to get some extra pickleball courts and she can help us over there. And
Well, you guys are doing great. I think what's happened over here is even height. It's all extra nice. So we're headed in a good direction.
Thank you, Jason.
thank you
Thank
guys.
you for your hard work over there.
Thanks,
I know
Jason.
it's been many years that it has not been lovingly cared for. So
We'll get there.
thank
We'll
you.
get there.
Thank
Steve
you.
Steve tried to get that basketball court fixed, the intense court fixed 20 years ago. And, you know, it was only like 5,000 or 6,000 back then.
And here we are, right?
And
Yeah,
here we
and
are.
here we are
Kick
now.
that down the road and build it to 100,000.
Yep. All right, so our next order of business is to go into wastewater commission, to become wastewater commissioners.
We do.
We do.
Wastewater commissioners.
Second, anyone?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Erica's left the room, so. Okay, we are now acting as wastewater commissioners. And we have an administrative appeal, which is the equivalent user fee for the Magunda Cook Campground. And this came to us, was it last meeting? We talked about it last meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So Ryan was tasked with coming back to you all with some feedback on this. And I talked with Drew McMullen today. He was in the office. Ryan was out of the office with a family emergency most of the last month, honestly. So he has information, but I asked him just to hold on to it because I don't think he really had time, honestly, to put it together for you guys tonight. As a bit of a preview, I suppose, he found that our rates were actually a little bit lower, in some cases substantially lower than what other similar systems. Yeah. But you know, I think it's best probably to have all that information laid out for you, and then I suggested to Drew that I ask if you could put it off another month till the March 13 meeting, and then perhaps you can make a decision at that point. So.
All right, so the motion is to table this to the March.
We need to table this matter until the March meeting.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
The exit is like, commissioners, everything for regular. Sorry.
No, you're fine, you're fine. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, all in favor. All right, back to regular meeting.
No, this is the sad part.
What, the sad part?
You have to move the board, you know.
Oh, no, liaison reports, do you have any
Oh.
liaison reports?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go through them. Eric, you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Let's discuss our joint meeting. That actually went really well between the Harbor Park and the
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
the Parks and Beautification.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, I was very impressed. It went a lot better than I kind of was expecting.
Okay.
So they actually made some decent progress, and it came down to a decision between tertiary and water. So, and the two boards are going to basically write up recommendations over which one they feel should have control over certain parts. And
So
they're
who
gonna,
governs?
yeah, each
Okay.
each special aspect within those points, and then the chairs are going to get together and hash it out and kind of basically come up with a recommendation of to who's in charge of what. So basically, if it's water based, it's the Harbor Park, and if it's going to be land based with some overlap, basically, is right.
Yeah, and I think that was really helpful. Doug and Sam sort of started talking about this before the joint meeting.
Yes.
So everybody can sort of come to a more or less understanding, so it's good enough.
Yeah, but I'm really glad that we got that to that point, because it will definitely solve a lot of who's in charge of what, and we can stop playing this back and forth game and just trying to make a decision. I mean, and so I'm expecting that maybe at the Harbor meeting's Wednesday, but we have budget, right? So maybe there will be, I didn't check the agenda, it's probably on there, but yeah. Should we talk about solid waste?
Sure.
Go ahead, you built the budget, you talk about it.
Yes, Murray, we had our budget meeting on last Wednesday. Was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Long and tiring. Basically, we came to the conclusion that we're going to hold the line on the assessments to maintain the budgets, mostly due to labor costs. But should we talk about the bags and the bag fee?
Probably.
Yeah. Yes.
There you go.
So bag
That's the big one.
fees, they're basically going to go up 50 cents. So they could go to 3 on the large and what is it, 2 on the small.
Yeah, it's on the small.
That
Yeah.
would make so much sense, it would be $15 for the
Yes.
bag instead of $12.50, or these guys are always dropping the 40.
Yes. So the bag fees are going to increase. The budget is fairly stable, but again, the majority of it was labor costs have gone up, contract negotiations. So,
And when's the bag increase?
well, we voted on the budget, and there's now the determination of whether the town managers have to go to the boards, and the boards have to decide. I don't know, there was some concern about the interlocal agreement and whether that was a requirement, because it's been a while since they've done it, so nobody was real clear. So it's finance committee, we're going to review that and decide if that's the direction it has to go. So, but there will be no increase on the assessment from Midco Solid Waste. So it'll be the same number, basically. I think our value went up, so changed a little, but I think that was it on my end. So, I mean, 2 basically decent meetings.
Do you have anything?
We got some work to do with it, done. A lot. It's, basically my honest to goodness feeling is, and and Bob did admit, and Falciani, that some of the problems that we haven't met, the strategic planning committee hasn't met for since October, I think, or whenever it was. I don't, you might have been to the last one
No,
there.
I never went
So,
because I
I
was sick.
mean, there's been some confusion and to me, basically, it's been on Bob. He admitted that he was guilty of not, following up, of course, and, you know, basically, I think, and that's basically why the board's been kind of dysfunctional, I think, is because we haven't met enough to, you know, I'm worried the amount of money we're gonna spend over there. I really am. I look and I don't see any, it's like a money thing. You know?
Literally,
Right.
it is.
And, well, Jonathan and I had that discussion today. I mean,
Yeah.
how long is the taxpayer gonna continue to have such a non-say, I guess, in such a volatile market? You can make a budget out today on revenue side of
Oh, yeah.
$50 a ton for cardboard and $50 a ton for tin, and all of a sudden, the first thing you know, you're paying to get rid of it. Well, you know, and like Jonathan said, would we be better off doing it all in one bag and send it to Portland? The answer to me is, we can't keep burying. We can't keep burying the trash, because
Well,
one thing that we're doing is making more every day.
Food waste is 70% of just dumps. None of that should be in the dump. It should all be going to scrap yards. But we just don't have educated people on that. Anybody who signs up for scrap yards is like, wow, I haven't filled up another bag.
Yeah, you definitely spend less because all my food waste and other people that bring me food waste goes to my chickens. So
Yeah.
I have and what I don't use for the chickens, I just compost it out in the backwoods, you know, and let the turkeys and stuff go through it.
So is that something, and, you know, don't read the media right now, but is that something that, the people at the gate when you come through could say, hey, welcome, here, take this flyer. And explain
And public education
Well, yeah.
about how the cost is done. 70% of what we're shipping across the state is landfill.
And,
Right.
and by doing that, you're saying, hey, you know, look at what you're throwing away.
People don't
Your
care.
neighbors have chickens.
People don't care what they throw away.
No, I
You
know.
would not believe it.
Well, I think,
Yeah.
The work
no, I
they
do. No, I do believe that. People don't care, but I think there's a certain segment that would try to do better.
And if they're only thinking about the $3 bag, but if they're also thinking about the sharing property taxes, I don't know.
They don't think.
And if you're young people who are concerned about climate change, that food waste is methane
Mhm.
at the landfill, and that's 25 times more potent than CO2 as a greenhouse gas.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of educating people on what that means.
Yeah, it is, but the big part of that, I think, comes down to the restaurants too. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I've worked in more than one restaurant, and believe me, everything goes in the trash. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm like,
Yeah.
but that's all recyclable. I don't care. It all goes in the trash. I'm like,
It's their lunch program.
They don't mess with it.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Hey.
So the incentive structure is not there to get, because you know most of those restaurants in Camden and some Rockport, they're going to Casella.
Mhm.
So we're not even seeing that waste, which
No, it doesn't-
by law, by ordinance, they're supposed to be actually. Oh, by the way, because we have all municipal solid waste is supposed to be handled by us, and then we decide where it goes. But put that aside. One thing that people need to keep in mind is, so we're going to go up on the bag fee largely because those costs of shipping and disposal in the field in Norwich Walk at the landfill there have gone up. But the other part, that the way we always have traditionally looked at that facility and the way we charge for that facility is the bag fee is meant to deal with any costs we have for our municipal solid waste. And the assessments, the amount that we're going to have in this budget book, are meant to deal with our costs to maintain the landfill. Here's the other dirty secret. The dirty secret is our cost to maintain that landfill are going up. Because, tell me if you've heard this before, we have to pump and treat the water that comes out of the quarry, and that goes to Camden's wastewater treatment
Yes.
plant.
And it's expensive.
We've gone-
$108,000
Right.
a year.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say that earlier, but I'm like. they don't need to do that.
I'll throw the grenade in. Right. So we're double paying. Rockport's paying double paying on this. Now, what I was also say is all the members of Midco Solid Waste, Camden and all four towns are concerned about that cost. And that's why we need a strategic and capital planning subcommittee that can look at how are the ways we can shrink the amount of water we're sending through Camden wastewater treatment. And are there other ways we can deal with that? But there hasn't been a committee meeting on it, so unfortunately.
We could,
Possibly.
but actually, the solution actually is to build a small reef.
Yeah.
Because the water that comes out of there is actually cleaner. It's cleaner coming out of the leachate field than it is after it goes to the treatment plant.
But they do want to send it through Lily Pond.
Well,
So we're gonna get it through Lily Pond one way or the other too.
I'm sure you can get Camden to schedule a strategic plan.
well, it's actually
Well, Bob,
supposed to be on the schedule.
Bob said that he was gonna hold a meeting next month with the strategic planning. To me, there's a lot of stuff going on
Yes.
over there that, that it wasn't brought up at the meeting the other night. His experimental plan of driving up to the thing and throwing your cans right in directly and doing away
Yeah,
with
that
doing
didn't
away
come
with
up.
all the trailers out there. Well, I said, well, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna have to move the scales.
Yeah.
Well, that ain't gonna cost much. I said, okay, and where are you gonna put it? So, I mean, there's a lot of things going on over there. It's gonna cost money. It didn't get brought up, that, I don't know how the hell they think they're gonna pay for it.
Yeah, it's not in the budget.
No. So,
The reserves,
Anyway.
the reserves are drained.
yeah, it's struggling, but
One thing that I'd like to see us, and this is that is sort of dump related, so at some point, I'd like to see us offer for our residents a roadside pickup. Not of trash,
Oh.
but of microwaves, tires, things
Mhm.
that normally would get thrown up on Mount Pleasant on the side of the road, or mattresses.
Right.
I mean, just maybe just once a year.
Well,
Have-
so we were doing the Rockport cleanup,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
Public Works was picking it up anyway. So to your point, rather have people one day in the spring be able to put their stuff out there, have Public Works take it instead of us
Have-
picking it up off the side of the road. you know?
Have one week,
Mhm.
spring designated so that every day is a different section of town, so that the highway can
Mhm.
focus on that one section, and people get used to that day every year as theirs. And then maybe we can eliminate some of the stuff that gets.
well, you ought to talk with the Waste Watch Committee over there. Because they do that. We got,
Large item pickup.
well, they don't do large item pickups. They walk down the edge of the road.
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
have,
that's what Michelle
right,
said.
yeah.
And then you'll find a mattress.
Yeah.
Right, then you gotta haul it out of the
Well, at
woods
least,
and, you
I
know.
think they still do that.
Well, yeah,
over
they
there.
do, and they
Yeah.
do it in
That's-
Rockport, and.
And I think that's one of those things that if you were to implement some sort of a program,
Mhm.
that you have, and that could be put out in the newsletter, it could be put out on
Mhm.
Fender Pilot, it could be put out by us publicly at our meetings.
Mhm.
But then you shifted, I mean, I think
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense, but then you're not even people paying their own dump fees to get rid of that.
Well, a lot of people wouldn't, though. I think.
Yeah.
Right,
Who's
so you
gonna
got
pay
two
for it?
options, they throw it in the woods, or you
Yeah.
give them a pickup.
Yeah.
And, I think that people just have stuff that's kicking around and they just don't bother.
Yeah, like that happens a lot.
And if they thought that,
Mhm.
And,
Well, like
and
the
it's enough,
like the e-waste that the Rotary does and all that,
Mhm.
those are great, because I think people feel, oh, I have, because let's face it, sometimes we're like, how do I get rid of something?
Yep.
How, do I throw it in a yellow bag? Do I
Yeah.
Yeah.
throw it on the side of the, or like, how do I get rid of
Yes.
something? And like with the e-waste, great, I'm gonna take all those printers and monitor, whatever, and get rid of them.
and this is another chance for us to say,
This is what you get from the town.
right, we're helping you out by giving you an
This is a
opportunity to
service,
get rid
yeah.
of it
Mm.
once a year.
Right.
Rather than have it sit in the garage or what, whether it's paint cans,
So are
tires.
you gonna charge them?
I don't,
Not if it's,
Everything that goes into the dump is chargeable.
well, tell them to take it out.
20, what's a 20-inch tire cost you now, $25?
yeah, but it's a 20-inch tire.
Yeah.
If someone, that's why people don't take it to the dump, right? Let's be honest. They don't take it to the dump because we're charging them $20. So someone goes up on Mount Pleasant and they just roll them down the hill.
Right.
And then you got a volunteer who lugs them up the hill and Public Works needs to pick it up.
Well, I said that years ago when I was on the board.
Yeah,
We
There's a
charge more
point,
for our
there's a
plowing.
point where somebody's gonna pay something,
yeah.
and that's the end of it. They're not gonna pay
They're not
anymore.
gonna pay.
And
They're gonna throw it all
No,
back.
no,
What
I think
happens
it's a
when
good
we
idea.
do those
I think
pickups?
we should consider it. I do think
Do we
it's a
pay
good
for that when we do the sidewalk,
But it's gonna cost
We
money.
do.
idea. It is.
Well, we
cover
bill for plowing
bag
snow
fees.
there in the winter time, let's get billed a little more.
Which is, I think the per ton is how they charge us.
Come on.
Denise, do you have?
I'm not worried about
updates?
what we do, I'm worried about what Camden's gonna say. If we get an extra dime for nothing, you know, we'll be bitching about that.
All right, well, let's see. ORC has got some, changes that they're working on that will be, valid in June. That's in process now. Economic Development Committee is, sort of, already sort of scoping out what they can do to help on the work and getting the word out and helping that people understand the contributions to economic development. Parks, good meeting with that, and we've got meetings as well. Legacy Rockport, I think I showed some of you the drawings that we have, the cover for the Vulcan, so, we've got a meeting tomorrow, we'll talk about that more. And on that agenda also is the RES site, so I'm not sure Charlton, what's happening on that. Yeah, library committee, got a tour of the library, and it's, our librarians did an amazing job.
Yes, they did.
And I only lost 2 books, that's
And that was in the book return.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So tone goes off at 10:09. Fire department's there by 10:20. Some of them were over at the toboggan races. They took a truck over, and then somebody else met them over here. Alan Mitchell met over here with their truck. Charlie Pearson, those guys. They clear out of there by 10:50. I pull in. The truck's leaving. Glenn is already there. It's Sunday best because he came from church. Matt is turned around on the highway, is coming back, and then Glenn and Matt spent the rest of the day with Ben cleaning up over there and moving water around. It's on a Sunday. That's why we got good folks. Yeah. Yes.
Well, we're on not that subject, but I asked Jonathan, going back to the treatment plant. I asked Jonathan today, we were talking today, and I said, I wonder if they could build a span bridge across there.
Like for pedestrians?
No, of the whole bridge across Rockport, build a span, and then you wouldn't have the columns going down, and you could put the treatment plant underneath on the right.
There is a difference, I remember from the
I wonder-
session, that the treatment standards for when it's in the intertidal zone versus.
Oh, that's right.
Off street, I don't know if that's a.
That's true. Forgot about that.
Yeah, that can't be where, it would, if you put it down there would be the risk of a high, real high tide.
Yeah, like the outflow pipe. That's right. He
And
said
the
it had to be
pipe has
above.
to be above the highest high tide, intertidal.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So, and the plant in that position would also be at risk of being in a high tide flood. So that would kind of throw it out of whack.
So much
What's
for
that
that,
idea?
yeah.
Tried.
You know, we're
Well,
gonna try.
So I was making notes while we were doing that. I said to myself, I mean, there's potentially a piece of property that might be for sale. Dana Starr's property behind Doug Hall's.
Yeah.
Oh,
That is, you know, there again though, if you put something down on the stream or the river, it's gonna be,
You're
there's
gonna,
nobody on this side it would affect, but there's people on the other side. that it would
so you're gonna make it so Janet will call me every
Yeah.
day while we're at work and call me
Oh,
to
gosh.
complain about that too.
I mean, yeah,
Wednesday night, remind me to not sit. Okay.
No, I'll
Don't
take,
tell Janet,
I'll
okay?
take Janet and, what's her name, Diana or Diana?
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
take them and we'll go over
Yeah.
there.
Good
All
thinking.
right,
though.
Mark, any updates?
EMS.
Oh, yeah.
Again, Wednesday nights, I have some personal commitments that there are certain committees that I just don't make. And I take that over the committee work, but that's why we have department heads, I hope, that are still making.
Yep.
So the EMS, we met, and Jonathan and I went, there were 16 people in attendance.
Yeah.
All towns were actually represented for a change. Camden had Stephanie French was there representing them, and their fire chief, Chris.
Mhm.
Jason was there for us,
Yep.
and Jonathan and I, and every other town had a fire chief, a board member, and a
Yep.
manager.
Well,
No, Stephanie was the only one. Did I say that out loud? Sorry. It is zeroing in on my end of day switch. So, there were no modifications to the agenda, consideration of the minutes, they all passed from the October 27th, 2022. No old business, public hearings with regard to the remote policy, remote meeting policy. And that, there were no questions there, we all voted in favor of it, everybody understood it. New business, Northeast Mobile Health gave their 2022 performance presentation, and they fell within the parameters that we've asked them to meet. We talked about complaints and any resolutions, whether there are any operational issues, upcoming initiatives or events, committee's role on quarterly assurances. And I think for the most part, I think it went pretty well. I mean, they're experiencing the same as everybody else, with wages and trying to find ways to keep people, and having whatever the Franklin County group is that come down to the hospital to take over some of that has, I'm sure, hurt them, because that took away some of their transfers, which is where they get the majority of their money. But they did say that they had given everybody a $2 across the board raise, and that they're looking at other things to help enhance that part of it.
Is there any discussion in the legislature is authorizing money to help shore up kind of?
Yep,
Yes.
there was, and I, on that side.
Oh.
But but there was.
Yeah.
There was talk about that.
absolutely.
Continue.
You gonna flip?
Go to the other side. We talked about the EMS-related community things, and they talked about some of their problems with answering lift calls, for instance, where they don't get paid, but they still go. I had asked for Andy Hart to join us at our next meeting because they, the county, had undertaken or were undertaking or planning to undertake a study, whereas it would be a county-wide EMS system. And they had two proposals. One was fairly cheap and the other one was fairly expensive. The cheap one is one that they've had in-house for a while. When I say a while, a couple, 2-3 years. And the other one was more nuts and bolts, getting into things. So we've asked, and he was gonna take that to the executive committee, which is all of your fire chiefs, your dispatch people, your, there's another one in there somewhere, and they were gonna run that up the flagpole to them.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know something? I thought it was a great idea for Andy to come up and show his face and say, hey, what do you think? Where are you? Don't let this drag. You know, because I think it's important to look at. Because frankly, at some point in time, we are going to have an expense. And if the county has got a better wheel invented and it's shared throughout the county, then let's do it. We talked about, John Duke had,
What'd I do?
yeah, no, I'm just trying to make sense of my notes. But,
Oh dear.
you know, I think it all went well, for the most part. The fire chiefs were given an opportunity to talk, and what they were doing to better be able to serve, serve their towns. And Camden is working on EMT status for some of their people. And, you know, we're hoping we can do hand in glove type of work with one another. And they're not meeting right now to take the place of an ambulance, but they could potentially get there 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes sooner than what the ambulance might. So if they can get there and stabilize someone, there's I forget what the percentage the doctor gave us. Some percentage greater likelihood that you will live.
Right.
If you're seen within the first few minutes versus the 10, 12 minutes.
Absolutely. Right.
I mean, it was good. And there wasn't any, no hostilities.
That's always a plus.
Say that for me, because solid waste, I
No,
guess.
it was good. And I think, you know, who was it sitting next to me that mentioned about the only person that was, I think it was John, mentioned that the only person who wasn't there was. Anyway.
So,
Did I miss anything?
Probably. No, I think one thing I would say is that they called out they called out their 95% issues. So the issues that fell outside of the 95% of calls that took longer for them to be there. There were 2 issues in Rockport in particular that took longer. Both did not result in transport, but they resulted in conversation at the meeting about one in particular. They called out that, that they went through why they felt that it was justified, the actions they did take that day, which, is nice to see, because that's been a complaint I've had of how we've structured that committee, is that, we're supposed to be able to keep an eye on whether or not we're providing good service, but they could never communicate those things to us. So,
Busco.
yes. Yep.
He had mentioned that 95% isn't always a good guide to go with.
Yeah.
Because you take that one call, that you fall down in the 70, you're 3 times as long to get there. That's why dragging the rest of it down.
Yep.
So they did break it out for those 2 events in Rockport.
Yeah.
And I did find where we talked about the funding for $70 million, and that there's apparently $6 million for training for non-transport services through the legislature, which is what they are going to tap into to help them shore up their people.
Or create these services.
$6 million of that is specifically earmarked for that. But what Rusco, I think, said was Washington County, for instance, they're gonna quit. They literally, they're not paying. I mean, Millbridge was on there the other day. With like 3 other towns, and they're trying to figure out what we're gonna do to keep our people. And they're in the same boat that they're.
Right. St. George.
Yeah.
All right. I need one final motion.
Oh, I'm done.
Oh, Mark,
I'm done.
oh, sorry, Mark.
No, no.
Denise says we should adjourn.
I'm okay with
Second,
that.
Split my screen.
Is this
Second.
thing off?
Ryan? All, any discussion? All in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have nothing, we're adjourned.
That's why I didn't move at all.
No. No, it makes me nervous.